while it would be wrong to prejudge the investigation, I can reassure the House that should evidence emerge that implies state responsibility, then Her Majesty's government will respond appropriately and robustly.
Strong words from the UK's Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson. At issue is the alleged poisoning of a former Russian spy on British soil. Johnson warned that if the Kremlin is behind the attack, there will be repercussions. Russia's foreign ministry took offense, saying the allegations are designed to complicate relations between London and Moscow. But many say the case echoes the fate of former Russian spy Alexander Litvinenko, who was poisoned to death in London about 10 years ago. So let's go over what we know now with former spy and whistleblower Annie Machon. She was an intelligence agent with the UK's security service MI5 until she quit the agency in 1996. Annie, thank you very much for joining us. So Sergei Skripal and his daughter, were they poisoned by the Kremlin?
I think there are many, many questions still. There are many known unknowns. It appears that some substance was applied to them. We don't know if it's poison. And until we can find out exactly what the substance was, we have no way of even beginning to investigate who might have perpetrated this, if it indeed is an attack. So I think for our Foreign Secretary to immediately say, you know, there are going to be repercussions for the Kremlin is jumping not one, but about 600 guns.
Yeah.
And I think it's rather reckless in this very delicate diplomatic era between the West and Russia for a Foreign Secretary to do that. Now, I could speculate he's doing this partly because he is actually the political master of the Foreign Intelligence Gathering Agency in the UK, MI6. And Skripal was indeed an MI6 agent, recruited by MI6 in the mid-1990s, caught out for his spying, his espionage in Russia, put on trial, convicted and sent to prison in the mid-noughties. And only in 2010 was he pardoned by Russia and released as part of a spy swap with the Russian illegal sleeper cell over in the United States. Since then, he's been living in the UK, where MI6 would have pinched him off and had a duty of care for him. So
right.
The political master, the Foreign Secretary of MI6,
doesn't that give Russia motive?
Should indeed be.
If he was still working for MI5 or MI6 or whatever, wouldn't it give Russia motive? Because then we can say, well, isn't it similar to perhaps what they did to Alexander Litvinenko?
I think there's a very clear distinction between Litvinenko and this case. Litvinenko was a dissident, he was a whistleblower, he had fled to Russia and sought sanctuary in the UK, and he, at the time of his death, was working as a consultant for MI6. However, what we're looking at in the current case is someone who had been arrested, been convicted, been pardoned by Russia and been freed by Russia and pensioned off. So he was not an active agent at the time of his death as far as we know, or there's a high probability. Plus, people who are swapped in spy deals tend not to be assassinated by the country which swapped them. I mean, I can't think of any other case in history where that's happened. So there are two very different cases. And I think, you know, it's natural to think, oh, there must be two poisoning cases, it must be the same as Litvinenko. But until we have the evidence, all we can do is speculate. And at the moment, I find that speculation very dangerous.
But Annie, who else would have wanted to kill him?
Who knows? I mean, this is what a police investigation will be looking into. What we do not know is what he's been doing for work since he moved to the UK. He's been there for, I think, 8 years, almost 8 years. So perhaps he was involved in other slightly nefarious schemes. Perhaps he was working for organisations that might have had competitors who are slightly ruthless. We just don't know. This is what the police will have to look into. But I think automatically assuming because 20 years ago he was recruited to work for MI6, almost 10 years ago he was pardoned and released and pensioned off, thereby it still makes it a spy case. I'm not so sure. It makes it a very sexy story for the media, but I'm not sure if that's actually where the evidence is going to take us in this case.
What amount of evidence would prove to you that Russia did it?
Well, that's an interesting semantic question as well. I mean, when we say Russia, what do we mean? Do we mean the Kremlin? Do we mean Moscow? Do we mean Putin himself? There's a conflation of these terms that is bandied around by the Western media particularly that cause problems in diplomatic relations between countries. It might well turn out it's something to do with some sort of Russian mafia thing. It might be another country's intelligence agency, for all we know. Or it might actually just be a genuine case of an accident and accidental poisoning. We just don't know at this point. This is why speculation is so dangerous, particularly when we get the Western media's sort of herd instinct. As soon as they hear the word Russian spy, oh, it must be Russia. And it's a very febrile environment at the moment because of Russiagate in America, where all fingers automatically point at Russia. It may well be that they were behind it, but to say that with total lack of evidence at this point, I think is very damaging diplomatically and potentially for peace.
Okay, so let me then just sort of rewind a little bit. And the reason I asked you that is because over time, there seemed to be incontrovertible evidence that Alexander Litvinenko was poisoned by the Kremlin. So would you accept that he was poisoned by the Kremlin, that met the evidence threshold?
There seems to be a lot of evidence pointing in that direction. However, again, we get sort of over-enthusiastic Western media saying, oh, well, if it came from the Kremlin or if it came from one of the spy agencies, Putin must have personally ordered it. Again, we have no proof of that. What I would say as well is there does seem to be a demonization of Russia going on at the moment. I mean, all our countries do this sort of thing.
Okay, but I'm asking a few questions. Certainly. I'm not the Western media. I'm not demonizing Russia. I'm asking basic questions. Was the man poisoned, and was it similar to Litvinenko?
Basically, we don't know if he was poisoned. The evidence indicates he might have been, but we're still waiting for the toxicology reports. We have to find out what it was, how it could have been administered, and then investigate who might have been in contact with him and his daughter that night. And then, you know, from there, work through his current life, work through his current contacts, and build together an evidential case about who might have been who might have caused this. At this point, we just don't know. It's speculation.
Okay.
The temptation tends to be, though, to blame Russia.
Okay. Annie Machon, thank you very much for joining us.